The ODNI needs to direct, not replicate in-house the other IC agencies' analytic, operational, and management functions. Considerations like mismanagement of human resources, joint duty assignments, and accelerated growth in senior personnel can cause a president to dictate to his incoming DNI a desire to slash redundant positions and expenditures while simultaneously giving the DNI the authority to drive necessary changes throughout the IC to deal with the nation's most compelling threats, including those emanating from China. As John Ratcliffe has noted, these are essential to the DNI having the ability and authorities to effectively direct, coordinate, and tackle the immense national security challenges ahead for the intelligence community as intended under IRTPA. Otherwise, other cabinet and subordinate IC agencies will continue to regard the ODNI as an annoyance and not as a positive contributor to the National Intelligence Program (NIP) budget. They will continue to work around or circumvent ODNI leadership decisions with appropriators and the Office of Management and Budget (OMB), or seek to wait out an administration or DNI to prevent a policy or intelligence priority from reaching fruition. Intelligence and interagency coordination has improved significantly since 9/11. Nevertheless, interagency rivalries and festering issues continue to cause duplication of effort on intelligence analysis and technology purchases, as well as overclassification and ever-increasing compartmentalization. Additional issues include the abuse of mandated onboarding approval and reciprocity timelines by some agencies, recruitment and retention failures, and a lack of will to remove underperforming or timely adjudicate the misconduct of senior managers and other employees. Finally, future IC leadership must address the widely promoted woke culture that has spread throughout the federal government with identity politics and social justice advocacy, replacing such traditional American values as patriotism, colorblindness, and even workplace competence. Executive Order 12333, IRTPA, was passed in the aftermath of the 9/11 attacks against the homeland. It was intended to improve the sharing of information among the elements of the IC, recognizing that the nature of the threats we now face blurs the line between foreign and domestic intelligence in detecting and countering national security threats against the homeland. An equally important objective in passing the most significant intelligence reform since the National Security Act of 1947 was creation of the position of DNI, charged with assuming two of the three principal roles that formerly belonged to the Director of Central Intelligence, DCI, serving as Principal Intelligence Advisor to the President and leading the IC as an enterprise. Nearly 2 decades later, the DNI's record of effectiveness in improving the sharing of information and operating the IC as an enterprise is mixed. Implementation of the DNI's roles as leader of the IC and principal intelligence advisor to the President has been challenging. However, despite flaws in the legislation and intelligence agencies' bureaucratic jockeying that undermine the DNI, it is impossible to know what would emerge if Congress were to revisit the Act. Seeking a legislative solution, therefore, might carry with it more risks than benefits. Instead, an incoming conservative president's immediate focus should be on modifying Executive Order 12333, the President's direction for implementing IRTPA. Executive Order 12333 was last amended on July 30th, 2008 by President George W. Bush. The revisions were aligned with IRTPA with significant emphasis on having the IC address the threats to the homeland from international terrorism and the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. There is scant mention of cyber threats and the evolving national security challenges posed by China, Russia, and other U.S. adversaries. By extension, the revised order fell short of stipulating how the DNI would execute his authority to organize the IC in a manner that improves the delivery of timely intelligence to a wide array of customers. Executive Order 12333 should be amended to take account of the changing landscape of threats and improve the functional aspects of America's intelligence enterprise. To that end, a revised order should address the threats to the United States and its allies in cyberspace. These threats range from cyber warfare to information operations. The amended order should clearly delineate the roles and responsibilities of the various U.S. government cyber missions, including the recently created National Cyber Director's Office and power centers at the NSC, while protecting the privacy and civil liberties of U.S. citizens. Under the DNI's direction, the cyber mission should explicitly identify how information in the cyber domain will be shared promptly with the warfighters, from law enforcement agencies to the broader IC and state, local, and tribal elements. The order should consider stipulating what to do with DoD cyber agencies, most notably the NSA, in terms of strategic, for example, the President and the DNA, versus tactical support, for example, support for the warfighter, in conjunction with ongoing congressionally mandated reviews of the future dual-hatted relationship. Enhance the DNI's role in overseeing execution of the National Intelligence Program budget under the President's authority. This should be done in a manner that is consistent with Congress's intent as embodied in IRTPA. Under the executive order as written today, the DNI shall oversee and direct the implementation of the National Intelligence Program. In practice, the DNI's authority to oversee execution of the IC's budget remains constrained by an inability to address changing intelligence priorities and mandate the implementation of appropriated NIP funding to higher intelligence priorities. The DNI should have the President's direction to address emerging but catastrophic threats, such as those posed by bioweapons, clarifying how much budget authority the DNI has in conjunction within the limits of congressional appropriations with OMB and IC member cabinet officials to move around money and personnel is crucial, but positions will not always be fungible. It will probably be necessary to hold IC leadership accountable at intransigent agencies and to restructure areas through executive orders in close conjunction with OMB as needed. Clarify the DNI's role as leader of the IC as an enterprise in building the IC's capability around its open source collection and analytic missions. The exponential growth in open source information, often called OSINT, is not disputed. In the IC, the use of publicly available information, notwithstanding the authorities within IRTPA for the DNI to manage OSINT, remains disaggregated. The explosion of private sector intelligence products and expertise should signal to IC leadership that duplicative efforts are unnecessary and that limited resources should be focused on problematic collection tasks. The IC should avoid duplication of what is already being done well in the private sector and focus instead on complex questions that cannot be answered by conventional and frequently increasing numbers of commercial tools and capabilities. If necessary, for lack of results from the National Open Source Committee, the DNI should appoint the Principal Deputy Director of National Intelligence, PDDNI, as chairman to prioritize and promote accountability for the IC's 18 agencies toward this effort.